Así han vivido todos estos milenios, pisoteando la vida que tanto tiempo protegí. Y el fuego que les regalé para poder sobrevivir, lo convirtieron en armas para destruirlo todo. Al verlos hoy tan confundidos y con tanto sufrimiento, la compasión me sobrecogió. Y conecté de nuevo con el fuego sagrado que llevan adentro. Y en un acto de rebelión frente a tanta contradicción, hoy entro en los sueños de los mortales y les susurro al oído: es hora de liberar a la diosa encadenada.
Thanks for participating and joining me in this presentation. And well, it's an investigation I did about the rupture that took place in the Neolithic. That's Silo's words. There is a rupture who took place at the beginning of the Neolithic between the feminine and masculine principles. So, and let's go to the second. So first, I want this was really a teamwork because there was so much friends helping in all this stuff. Friends helping me to put all this rich research into a structured form, friends correcting mistakes, getting information from archaeological sites, editing photos, texts, etc., etc. So it seems like more a pit or a teamwork. And for me, the exchange groups we had with Karen were also an important material which I put inside this research. It inspired me a lot, and I really enjoyed the 2 times we met all the English people together, because it was a different view, that a different kind of conversation that we had with the Spanish speaking people. So it was very interesting. So thank you for that. So, well, the inspiration of this work comes from this letter from Silo to Karen in 2003. And I got also very interested in some pages. Silo talked about the human process in these school notes everybody has. And of course, the stone talk. So let's go to the 4. So we worked on the hypothesis given by Silo that at the beginning of the Neolithic period, there was a rupture between the masculine and the feminine principles. But he doesn't say anything more. It was like something like a sort of theoretical idea. So I was very curious about knowing when this took place, in which condition it took place, to have more information, because it was just a theoretical conception he had. And usually we admit that he's right, but I needed to know how was this going on? When does it occur? 7,000, 5,000, 10,000? And then what were the conditions where these matriarchal societies transformed into patriarchal organizations? And well, there I figured out, sorry, that there were, I defined 4 stages, and each stage has a characteristic about the type of goddess, a particular mythical structure, and the relation between the feminine and the masculine. So we will go through 4 steps or 4 periods in a quite, well, ambitious time of year, because it will go from 35,000 before to 4,000 before. So it's quite a long period. But anyway, so I try to deepen what Silo says in the same letter, where he says the last 10,000 years show the rapid changes in uses, habits, customs, and ways of life. This is fine, But in the origin of this new cycle, a rupture occurred that could never be transferred, that could never be filled. This mental and psychosocial situation is also accelerating out of control. And he adds, and everybody knows it because we have been talking together, that what needs to be done is to unblock and transfer collective contents from the matriarchal substrate and make them available to the collective. So this second part is, I think, is still very theoretical for me. I think I got more in this first part, which was to understand when all this happened. So there is a work for you guys to be done. So if I wanted to understand what was Silo saying in the second part, it implied also to study from inside. What is the gap that could never be filled? What is the gap inside ourselves, inside myself? What is this gap between the rupture of two principles? And how do we register this rupture inside ourselves? And what could it mean to unlock and transfer collective contents? So this was the very difficult part of the research, and you will see it's quite short in relation to the other part because it was very difficult. So, okay, let's go through. There is a phrase which surprised me a lot is when Silo says this conversion from matriarchal to patriarchal societies is a general phenomena in almost all cultures of the world. All cultures of the world. It seems amazing because he develops a little bit this in the school notes, and he says that it was cultures who were not necessarily in touch, and the Neolithic period is not the same for the Levante than for China, than for America. So it happens in different times. It happens without links between these different places, but it happens the same. So it leaves a lot of questions about this. Um, for example, could it be that as species, we had to move from a collective consciousness to an individual one? Like a part of a process that must now continue to grow? Well, that's quite evident today. I mean, this individual and super possessive consciousness is collapsing the world. So we have to move from that. But how come that in all these points, we went from a sort of collective consciousness to this very individual consciousness? So I leave it open because I couldn't answer it. It's too, but it could be also another kind of research. So a six, the six. So this is the structure of this investigation or monography. And I told you that each chapter corresponds to a stage and the relation between human being and the goddess. So I took as the first step the Paleolithic, the upper Paleolithic with the caves and the Venus from 35,000 to 15,000 BC. Then I took the Mesolithic, which is um, 15,000 to 10,000. It's when human being came out of the caves. And it's a period of the intuition of the goddess, of the agrarian goddess. Then I took the birth of agriculture and the myth of the mother goddess, which I took from 10,000 to 7,000. And then the fall of the mother goddess and the primacy of the seed, which I put from 7,000 to 4,000 before. So there are different world views, cosmovisiones, world views in each of the stages, but of course they are linked. Nothing comes from nowhere. One comes from another. So for example, uh, you have the same characteristics by the Venus of the upper Paleolithic, the Venus of Willendorf, for example, and then the mother goddess of Cataluyuk. You will see things which are similar. So you see that there is a process in between them, which is not two things which have nothing to do. They are linked, but with 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 years between. So the 7, I don't know if you want to make questions and interrupt, because it could be like a talk or together, or if we leave all that for the end. It's up to you. We can sort of, maybe it's more dynamic if somebody interrupts and we have a talk. So you decide. Well, and before going to these 4 chapters, um, I made a sort of introduction of the beliefs that are changing since 50 years ago. This is a quite of, well, it's not a feminist point of view because it has arguments. And it's that since the 60s, uh, in the 60s, uh, the history was told by man only. It was the story of mankind, but told by man. So the other 50% of the species was missing. And you started having around the 60s until now, of course, historians, I mean, women which are historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, philosophers, and they also start to study the past. And they observed other kind of findings in this history which emerged and which are very argumentados, which have very strong arguments. So I want to give some examples because we have to switch a little bit our own beliefs. So for example, until the 60s, we believed all that men were very active. They were hunters, they made the tools, and the women were sort of passive, like taking care for the child, cooking, and being in the settlements where caves where they were usually living. But for example, in the Andes, they discovered woman hunters. They discovered women buried with all their tools of hunter. So it's not this kind of division. I mean, the tendency is to look to history from the from the from the from the tensions we have today. Well, we know about all this stuff. You look behind, but with the system of tensions you have nowadays. So nowadays we have this big separation between women's roles and man's roles, and we look at the history on that way. But things were apparently not like that. So there is a distortion about history, which we have to assume and to correct. Another example, for example, is that the cave art was a ritual of man. But in several caves, for example, the one I studied is the Pechmerle in France, you have a woman's handprinting around some animals. So, well, there are questions. It's like, were they painting the cave? Is it a signature of the person who was painting this representation? But in any case, women were in the caves. Then another kind of belief is that man started the Neolithic and discovered the domestication of plants and animals. Well, this is also not true. And here I take very much from Silo. He said that it's probably the woman who, as they were for a long time settled in the point, sorry, I'm, as they were settled in one fixed point, they would observe the plants because, well, they were with their children and they will see the changes around them. So probably the domestication of plants and animals was more something which came out from women than from men, which were always moving around, hunting. But when you're fixed on the place, you can observe what happens with your surrounding. It changes, it gets I don't know, green. It, you can you have the perception of the change. And also regarding domestication of fire, uh, yes, I got water. Um, concerning domestication of fire, Silo also mentions that it would be more an ability from the woman to domesticate fire because it has very similar things with taking care with children. You have to feed the fire, you have to keep it tranquilo, you have to manage it. It's a little bit the situation you have when you have children around. That's not notes from the school notes where he talks a little bit about that. And I also take a point of view because there is still a discussion that if the representation of that period are realistic or symbolic. So the most conservative beliefs says that symbolic thinking was impossible at that time because it's too abstract. But from our point of view, we think, and it's a point of view which a lot of archaeologists and people have, is that those figures do not represent reality, and it's a symbolism about their relation with the word. I think you would agree with it because it's also our way of having the conception on other things. I mean, they had already a very developed mind, so why should we think that they were just painting reality? And then uh, are we at in the eighth slide? Um, yeah, next one, I think. Uh, I wanted to draw the attention on the concept of conservation. I mean, Silo has two concepts which I found are very relevant, is conservation and then domestication. Conservation, domestication. Conservation appears in very different moments. And he talks, for example, of the ability of women which are linked to the conservation of their clan. No, that's not Silo. I'm sorry. But from where I have this well, okay, I go through. The conservation of their clan is a role of the woman. Why? Because in this goddess they had this goddess of the Upper Paleolithic, the Venus, which one example is the Venus of Willendorf, but you have a lot of examples. The goddess is generating life within her body. She at that time there is no they have no idea about the two principles generating life. There is just one woman, a female, which is carrying life and giving life at that moment. So the goddess generates life in her own body, and that has a very important function because it gives the conservation of this species. Species?
Yeah. Issues.
Species.
Issues. Yeah.
And then we have conservation with the fire, which is another big thing to manage, because when fire gets extinguished, it could take generation to find another source, a volcanic source or burning fire to get fire again. So when they got the conservation of fire, which Silo puts 300,000 before BC, you have to elaborate a lot of technology to be able to maintain the fire. It's a lot of neuronal work where you fail, you succeed, until you find the way to conserve this moving being. And then later in history, we will come across the conservation of grains. I mean, a lot of people talk about conservation of grains, which is again the same concept. So instead of eating all the grains and the seeds, they will leave a part away to keep them for winter, for example, and later on for planting, to have seeds to be planted. So this is this concept of conservation. This other word we had is domestication. And I would like to make the same exercise with this word because it also appears through the human process. And I think Silo uses it in a very precise way because he speaks about domestication of fire and then domestication of plants and animals when they understand the two principles, the two male and female principles. So the pit in this case allows the domestication of fire because fire alone is a flame which is not controlled. So when they manage the pit, when they understand the pit, they start controlling, domesticating the fire. So what I understand what Silo's saying in domestication is to be able to use it for your own benefit or for the benefit of mankind. And he says, it's not his words, but he says it's from this elementary oven will emerge everything that will later be civilizing conquest from this domestication. Well, it's just two concepts which go through all this, I don't know, period, but when I read when I read Silo talking about this, these two concepts I found them very important and to clear them up. So okay, let's move now to the chapters. Maybe it's a divagation, I don't know, but for me they were very important and then I found them also in other books. So I say, wow, it's not only Silo, it has a special way, conservation and domestication, but it can be a cosa loca. So let's move to the chapters. Um, so what is happening at the end of the Upper Paleolithic? We have still man or mankind in the caves because we're still in a glaciation. We are in the last glaciation. So they live usually in caves and well, in summertime they will have these transhumance, but the cave is is their usual house. They are hunters, they are harvesters because well, the glaciation hasn't gone. And it's in this period of time that appears these small Venuses. So I took the Willendorf, but you will see that there are a lot of this kind of Venus. They found from Spain to the Siberian, uh, not hundreds, but a lot of different kinds. And in this case, Marijo Gambutas is part of these important discoveries. Uh, she has been concentrating on this for very a lot of years, and I will concentrate on her more than others. Here you have La Vieja Europa, which is the part where Marijo Gimbutas has been searching more for this Venus. But in fact, the Venus have been found from Spain to Russia. I mean, the territory of this Venus is much bigger. It's just here in this card you have what Marijo Gimbutas has been searching. But the Venus is all Europe, you know. So we have these small figures next. I think in the next we have the small figures. They are 10 to 13 centimeters. Centimeters? How you say? Centimeters. They fit in the hand. They fit in the hand, and some could be hanged on the neck because they found that they had a ojito here, so they were hanged, and they were found usually near the pits, the fire pits, or anyway in the domestic area. There are dozens of this little goddess. It's sort of each region had his own representation of the goddess, but they have always the same form. They have no features in their face. You see, there is no expression. Their arms and legs are just insinuated. They are not really there. And this part of the body doesn't seem important for the representation they are supposed to give. On the other hand, they have these large buttocks and hips, showing that she's giving birth to many children, generous breasts. So they clearly indicate fertility, fecundity as part of their attributes. The breast and the fat belly can be understood as the guarantee that there will be food for everybody. It's like she's saying, you're not having hunger with me. So we can interpret that she is the, and Karen did it in her work, that she's the representation of the sacred feminine. And that's what Karen develops in the rapture. So life emerges from the body of the feminine, and they are the ones who protect, nourish, give life, and ensure the continuity of the human species. And let's go to the next. So let me summarize the essential themes of this chapter to make some synthesis. So we have this ability in the lower Paleolithic, we're talking about 2 million years ago, you have this ability of human beings in relation to other animals to go and take the fire. Then in 300,000 before, you have the domestication of the fire pit that will protect the flame. And then in the upper Paleolithic, you will have this Venus where it's clear that life emerges from the body of the female and woman. That's what they observe. And they represent that with this Venus who protect, nourish, give life, and care for the continuity of the species. So the sacred feminine is a spirituality because you depend on what she will provide, if she will be generous to give continuity of the species or not. So the next, any question? We go on. So it's very, I mean, I can't make it very long because if not, we're going to be here 3 hours. So it's the first chapter will talk about all this stuff. Then in the second stage, we are in the Mesolithic. What is happening now? It's the end of the glaciation. The ice retreats. Ice retreats around 15,000, 14,000 before. So mankind are coming out of the caves. And in this map, you will see the first huts, the first areas of huts, which are Ein Gef, for example. You see Ein Gef here, Murray Bed. This huts, you say huts or hats? Chosa. Huts. The huts are semi-buried. It looks like it's like a cave. They put it like the cave. They go into the earth. So they're not on the earth. They are like in part in the earth.
It's like a pit.
Like a pit. And they will have the distribution you see here on this image on the left side. So you enter and you have like different functions in this. The diameter of this hut is 3 meters. So it's very small. And the settlements they found in Ein Gef and Muribet is you have 10 or 15 huts together. So it's very, very little settlements, maybe for, I don't know, 10, 15 families, something like that. Let's continue. I mean, people are still hunters and gatherers, but they start, but the big difference with the moment before is they start with the settlements around fertile areas which have crops, which have wild plants. They will settle there. I mean, in the map before, this is a very, very fertile area. And very quickly it will go towards the Tigris and the Euphrates because it's very fertile valleys. So they will settle down where they have food, let's say it on that way. And archaeological samples show that that it's like that. They settle down in the fertile valleys. They are not going to, I don't know, to mountains or where you don't have food. And let's go to the next. And you will have this image here has been found in a cave in this area. So they start having an intuition that there are two principles which unite. because you see here two bodies united. So it seems to me of what I read is that the intuition starts coming up, that there are two principles who are closely linked together, but everything is just intuition. There is no, they can't prove it. They can't, there is no domestication because they can't reproduce it. It's just intuition. It's just observation. So it's sort of a grasping of intuition. Probably the feminine principle is represented with the goddess, which already came from the Upper Paleolithic, and the masculine principle will be the bull and the bullhorn, which represents the force of life. So in the monography, I will put where I take the sources from and all that stuff, but here I just tell it like that. On the other side, they also have a cult of death. So they will, well, they had it before, but now they take the death of family members, and they will bury them under the heads. And after a while, they will take them out, and they will when once the that person is dried and you have just the bones, they will take them out, dig them out, and they will make a human figure with plaster. And which is amazing is they make these figures in a real proportion, 1:1. So you will have figures of 1 meter 20, and this figure will be sometime in the house. It's like an ancestor who will protect the house. They make it with plaster, and they put shells at eyes. Here on the left, you see, you have this is a buried woman who has been remade with plaster, the shells in her eyes, and she has she has 1 meter. So it's what archaeologists say is that uh, they show that they have another position in the world. It's not things don't happen and I don't manage anything. It's I'm here and I'm starting to understand how things are. It's like I'm more empowered than in the stages of the Paleolithic. So the synthesis of this second stage, we could say that the last ice retreats occur and human beings emerge from the caves. The land yields abundant grains, wild plants, and humans settle around these valleys in these semi-buried huts. And well, one example of all this is the Natufian culture, which is now in Palestinian territory. And they put it in 12,000 before. This cult of the dead, which I was telling you, and the symbolic figures, the bull, the bucranium reliefs, which you will find in the houses. I will show you a picture later on. And probably the upper Paleolithic Venuses, mainly in Europe, because in Anatolia, you will find another kind of goddess. We're going to see them now. So we start with the third chapter, which is the beginning of Neolithic. So Neolithic starts 10,000 before, not in Europe, but in this part of the Levante, it starts 10,000 before, which is also what Silo said. So these sedentary little groups will transform into real agriculture communities. And this is clearly another moment in the relation with the goddess. They start domestication of plants, some hundreds or 500 years later, the domestication of animals. And that's the way they ensured the population a permanent food supply. So people have food in these settlements. The settlements, in this map on the left, you will see it expand and will develop towards this fertile valley of the Tigris and the Euphrates River. And if you notice, well, agriculture starts in this point. I mean, all we know in Europe, and we'll start here in the actual Palestinian territory, and then Tigris and Euphrates. And Europe will start with the Neolithic in 6,000 before. I mean, like 4,000 years later. Uh, the, there are many changes taking place. Mainly, the houses will become houses on which are not buried anymore. They are on the superficial. And but I don't want to get confused. This image here is not a house; it's a shrine. Why it's a shrine? Because you have here the Bocranian on in el fondo, en la pared del fondo, you have this three Bocranian, and then you have the goddess, which is giving birth. So this is not a house. It's a little bit bigger than a house, but the way they have constructed this shrine is very similar to a house. So you enter the house by the second level, which is the terrace. You enter into the house. The terrace is also used as a common place. And then inside you will have, well, what you need to sleep. You have the oven. You have this sort of shelter. But but the image here is a shrine. I'm very clear about it because a friend said, well, but this is a shrine. It's not a house. But houses look quite similar, but are much smaller. And here you see the two principles. Where at the beginning of Neolithic, you have the masculine principle with the Bocrane and the feminine principle with the goddess. So we will talk about Cataluyuk and about the mother goddess of Cataluyuk, which is here on the left. Because Cataluyuk is one of the oldest settlements in the Near East. And so the mother goddess of Cataluyuk is one of the oldest ones. This goddess is 20 centimeters long, so she's bigger than the Venus, 10 centimeters more. And that the way she's sitting there on this throne, she's sort of facing the world. She's very present. I put the two images together because it's interesting to see the difference. Even, I mean, you have to know that when they found this statue of Cataluyuk, she had no head. she was without head. So we can't say that we can't say that they had more features in their head because that's suppositions. She was found without it. But clearly, with the position she has, she's sort of facing the world. In the other case, the Venus, she's sort of concentrated inside her body. It's totally other relation with the world. I don't know if you feel it like this, but I feel one is much more inside and the other one is I'm here.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
So that head that she has here is made up afterwards.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not real, let's say.
But you see it by the color. You see that the color is lighter, and one of the leopards is also lighter because it was found without one head was missing.
Yeah.
So maybe the features were not so precise.
But she did have features.
What we can say is that she's facing the world because of the position of her body. She's sort of facing the world. She's not I don't know, she's not looking behind or
like the other.
Or that's what we can say if we are very precise. In this is very specific information because a friend was studying her. When I wrote it, I thought that she was entirely found. So I didn't make the difference, but she said be careful because she was found without the head. So it's very specific information. In internet, they don't make the difference. But anyway, I also put these two together because you see the link. There is a relation between both. It's not that the Venus of the Paleolithic went one way and the Cataluyuk went another way. There is, I mean, they have still this big breasts. Both are giving birth. Both have this strong body, you know. So there is continuity, but there is also difference. Let's go to the next. So the intuition that had been growing since the Mesolithic now becomes a certainty that life is produced by the union of two principles. The feminine, which is the container, the womb or the pit, and the masculine, which is the seed that needs to be contained in the womb in order to mature, to grow, and to come to life. So in the agriculture myths, the masculine becomes the consort of the goddess. I mean, myths start evolving, and in a certain moment, the goddess has a little consort. It's little like this. Sometimes it's her own son because she will hold it in her arms. And this little consort will represent the seed that grows in this womb, which is earth, and then appears as a plant and dies, leaving all the seeds behind. So they start having this notion of this whole cycle, which reproduces again and again and again. Let's go to another picture. This picture has nothing to do with the period we are in because it's Crete, but it's a goddess in a Cretan gold seal. But I took it because of the image which is represented here. If you look at the image, you see the goddess on the left. She's sitting under the tree of life, and she's giving life to her little consort, which is just on her feet. He's appearing from the earth. If you look closely, you will see he's sort of appearing from the earth, and she's sort of giving birth to him. She's surrounded by a priestess, and there's also this double axe, the labris, which were symbols which were present in Cataluyuk in the period we are talking about. And well, why did it maintain? ¿Por qué se preservó? Why was it preserved in Crete? Because as it was an island, the structure of the mother goddess was much longer, remained much longer than what happened in Anatolia and Mesopotamia. So we have this image is interesting to show us what is the myth about the goddess. So we are talking about a very powerful goddess. She presides the mystery of life, of death, and of resurrection. Do you remember something about the Virgen Maria? So life, death, and resurrection. She knows the whole cycle of life, the plant that grows, that dies, and that is reborn. She also can give birth again to her consort, to her little consorte, who had gone to the underworld and returns in spring when the goddess brings all of nature back to life. So it's not only the consort she brings back to life, she brings everything back to life, the whole nature. Another fact that surrounds the goddess is that every year, let's go to the other one. Every year she celebrates this sacred union, the Hieros Gamos, where she unites to the consort. This is the most important day of the year because people will pray that the following year should be abundant in food and plants and animals, and all that is presided by the goddess. All this festivity is presided by the goddess. She's the main figure there. Almost all the mother goddesses will have their consort. For example, Inanna, which is Sumerian, will have Dumuzi. Ishtar, which is Babylonian, will have Tammuz. Cibeles will have Attis, and so on. I mean, the consort appears everywhere because of this union of these two principles. So a synthesis of this chapter, I would say that they start, it's not an intuition anymore, they discover these two principles, and this leads to the domestication of plants and animals. We are talking from 10,000 to 7,000. Don't forget. We're establishing a true agriculture communities in Tigris, Euphrates River, and in Palestinian territory. And the mother goddess is the mistress of plants, of animals. She's the main figure, or she knows about the mystery of life, of death, and she's able to regenerate them. And she's always, she starts being accompanied by her consort, who dies in autumn and who is brought back by the goddess in spring. And this myth will be incarnated in different mother goddesses. So each region will have their own mother goddess. It's not one for everybody, but they all have this common structure. And Mircea Eliade, for example, he gets very deep in all this stuff, and he will say that the floods and the droughts, sequías, will be translated into mythological dramas. For example, this story of Persephone is a drama because, well, the story says that Hades will take Persephone and will wrap her, or will carry her with force into the underground world. And Demeter, which is the mother, will start looking for her everywhere on the world, and she will forget about crops, and everything will dry up. So it's because of that situation that Zeus calls her and says, well, we have to do something about this. Because if people are going to die, we will die too, because nobody's going to remember us. So that's a drama, but which is finally a translation of a sequía, of a big sequía, of a big drought. So now we enter into the fourth chapter. Let's go on. Okay, which I called the fall of the goddess and the primacy of the seed. Well, here I took, it's funny because when you make this kind of research, suddenly you have some books in your house and you never open it. And I don't know why, but I opened that book, which I bought like 10 years ago in the Louvre. And there was a whole big chapter, long chapter about this El Obeid culture, Obeidian culture. So I will take this example of the Obeid culture, which is in the south of Mesopotamia, which is at when the Euphrates and the Tigris arrives to the Persian Gulf, to the sea, because it's a land which has a lot of, which is very loamy, arcilloso. And what's interesting there is that you could find out the different levels of settlements of that culture and recognize what was one level, second level, third level, fourth level, etc. And well, this part of Mesopotamia is also where you have Ur, Uruk, Eridu, and we know these cities because of the myth of Gilgamesh. You remember? Uruk is Gilgamesh is the king of Uruk. Below this Obeidian or El Obeid culture, you have, let's go to the other one, I think. No, let's go up again. You up to this culture, you will have the Hasuna culture, and let's go now down. The goddess on the left, this Halaf culture. Halaf culture is from the Hasuna culture, and you will see this statue of this goddess. You will see them in Uruk, in Ur, in Eridu, because they will start having trade relations. You will also have this kind of goddess, which is from the Girshu dynasty, which is worked on stone. She's also a goddess. She's in this part of the area we're talking about. So you will have different kind of representation of the goddess. So this one, the right one, is part of the Obeid culture. Let's go to the next one. So here we have the different levels of the Obeid culture. And we will go from 7,000 to 4,000 before. The very, very first level, they couldn't figure out anything because it was everything was, they couldn't figure it out. So they started with Elobate 0, which goes from 7,000 to 5,900 before. What do they see there? They see two large graneros. How you say graneros? Tell me in English. Granaries?
Granaries.
Granaries.
Granary. You see two huge granaries in the center of the settlement, which probably were for the whole community. Very interesting. They had a community work around the seeds, and you will see the tools. I mean, there are a lot of foundings around. You will have the tools to aplastar el grano. There is everything which shows that it's they work. Everybody's working at this central part of the settlement. Then you have Elobate 1, which goes from 5,900 to 5,500 before, and you will see different granaries, smaller, but sort of distributed around the settlement. So they presume that the population growth and that they had to have a more decentralized way of working with these granaries, but it's still a common work. And then, well, then you have other things like the pottery, because in that time you have already ceramics. So in the pottery, you have already also findings which shows, for example, a very complex pottery will show you that there is more identity in this culture. And if you have a very simple pottery, there is no need for identity, or you make so much of this kind of objects that you don't care. It's like a mass work. So they take different elements and they put them together. So in Elobate 2, 5,500 to 5,300, you see commercial exchanges between the south, Obate, and the north. So you will see figures like this goddess we saw before. You will see this goddess coming into the Obate culture. You will see clay seals being from the Obate culture in the Hassuna one. There is already trade and links, commercial links. Remember this because we're coming back to that period. Then we have Elobate 4. In Elobate 3, 5,300 to 4,700, you clearly see new forms of social organization. In the center of the settlement, you don't have you had this place which was empty now because the granaries were sort of distributed. Now you have a large monumental building which has two levels, one level and two level. The level 1, this one, is upper, has a differentiation with the level 2, which is much bigger. So it seems that here you had a small class of elite, which were talking to all these people which were gathered in the other level, in a sort of esplanade, which is below. And there are no religious objects which were found at that place. Then in the Obate 4, which goes to 4,700 to 4,300, you have an increasingly social structured city. The city is much more socially structured. So you will have neighborhoods which will have a great development, rich houses, wide houses, and you have neighborhoods which have smaller houses, smaller streets, less richness, less holgura, riqueza. And you have
Less rich.
which are less rich. You're right. Then you have Elobate 5, which goes from 4,300 to 3,700, where you have more and more this hierarchy. and you will have the constitution of a centralized political power. And we arrive to, so what happens? What are my remarks? And what did I learn about studying all this stuff? It's that in the Ubaid III period, 5,300 to 4,700, you have the end of this agricultural societies based on parity organization. At that moment, there is a new form of organization which is emerging and which will develop without interruption until 2,000 years. From this central place where the grains of the whole community were stored in a few millennia, you will see imposing palace complexes, because this structure later will lead to palaces which will have walls. You will have two kind of structured places. One is a palace, and what seems to be a sort of administrative common place. And the differences are each time more and more. You will see this reflected in the cylindrical seals of goods and of properties. Let's go on, because I have a seal there. Now, I think it's above here. Here you have the image of a seal. You have this person has 3 bulls or 3 cows. A seal is very small. It's like a finger. And here on the map, you see how the expansion of all this kind of structures. I mean, it's not only the cities in the south which will take this hierarchy. It's going to go up and will take all this part of the territory, and then it will expand everywhere. Let's go on. The next one. And so along with the social and political transformation we were talking about, you will see the figure of a priest king emerging in this culture, and he begins to have all the functions of the former mother goddess. So the function of fertility will be symbolized by his union, because he will preside now this union as the divine god or divine king. He will have this union with a priestess chosen for this occasion, and roles changes, and the mother goddess becomes now the consort of this masculine god or king. And his image will be reproduced on many seals, cylinders, sculptures, bas-reliefs, I don't know. They will show him in daily life situations. They will show him hunting, being a priest, being a warrior, a guerrero, winning battles. And you start having a cult of this priest king, who later on simply becomes the king. Like Gilgamesh will be a king. He's not a king priest. So let's go further on. So here you have the area of expansion of this Ubaid culture. And it shows also the level of trade, politics, and influence that this culture is achieving now. The other cities of Mesopotamia will acquire similar characteristics. And at this moment, the central places where the 2 granaries used to be will be now, and around 3,000 will be the place for the coming ziggurats. It's there where they will place the ziggurats. And nobleza and nobility was established that had a certain political power and become rich by trading goods. There will be different categories of workers and of crafts. But for example, there is a layer of arcilla, where you have the differences, the different social hierarchies, and it's presided by the king, and then you have all the others. So, and these terracotta tablets, which have been found by the archaeologists. The city becomes more an economic and administrative center. The farmers, for example, will not live inside the walls anymore. For example, if we take the example of Uruk, we see that the surrounding villages supply Uruk with the food, and the cylindrical stone seal will be the distinctive sign of this rising power. They will use the clay supports to manage the goods and have the account on them. And the same support, these clay tablets, will be used later on when they start writing. So, I mean, writing comes from the clay supports they used for trading. It's funny, but it's like that. And on the other side, to ensure the patriarchal lineage, the man will have to control woman's sexuality, because how does he know that his child belonged to him? So he have to have control on her to know who are his children. So the woman starts becoming one more of the possession in this patriarchal economy. Well, it's an interpretation of many things I read. It could be discussed, but because feminists, for example, will say that this happens at the very beginning. They say that they put it like they put the possession of women like the first step, and then trade began. But for me, it seemed more logical that trade began and commercial exchange come out, and this everything starts being structured on another way. It's like a structural thing. It's not a linear thing. But well, you have different discussions about it. Okay, we go on.
Anna,
Yes.
I don't know if it's the moment. I just put the question. I didn't understand very well. How do you combine the trade with the need of the men to control the woman and know that the child is mine? I didn't understand that very well.
Because of possession. If you trade, you have some possessions because things are mine. This is mine, and I'm going to trade it and to take it somewhere else. So it's the possession which starts beginning a concept. Because when we were all together, there was well, everything was together. But now that there is commercial links, I have to sell something which is mine. I can't. Well, now politicians sell what is from all the country, but but that's nowadays. But at that time, you can sell what is yours. So you start having this possession notion. And because of this possession notion, you also need to know, I mean, on the other side, you want to know who are your children, because now we are not in a matriarchal system where you just know the mother, because you can say, yeah, this is the mother because this child came out from this woman. You're in a patriarchal system, so you have to control the woman, because you need to know who are your children, because they are going to inherit what is your possession. So let's go to Tiamat. So here, this picture, or this bas-relief, you will say, of Tiamat struggling against Marduk is the Enuma Elish story, which we know because of myths. So it tells the destruction of the goddess by the erasing god Marduk. Tiamat is a very ancient goddess from the Paleolithic. That's what Mircea Eliade says, because she's a dragon or sort of serpiente, and she lives in this profound waters. So these were conceptions they had a long time before. So she's very ancient. And the myth shows Tiamat and the other goddesses, which are like the parentela, the family of her, with quite satanic attributes. They got mad. So that's the way they try to enhance Marduk as a very good god who comes to bring order in all this mess. Because this mess has been created by these ancient gods who got mad, and Tiamat got mad. That's the way they explain the intervention of Marduk. So Marduk's attributions for combat are a bow, a quiver, and a net. his garment is shining in the sun, just as iron would do. So we are close to the iron a la edad del hierro. We are close to 4,000, 3,000, so it fits. Marduk comes with iron. So Marduk will neutralize the goddess. He will crush her with his mace, and from her body he will make the word. So it's the end of the goddess. Kaput. Ciao. The end of the goddess, which is coincident with these archaeological layers of the Obeid culture. That's very interesting because you see the same millennia in the archaeological Obeid levels, and you see them also in the myths. So there is a relation. I mean, it's not one goes one way and the other one goes another way. We're talking on quite similar millennia, 4,000, 3,000, but the goddess starts falling in 5,000, 5,200, 5,500. So Marduk will reorder the universe from these new powers that he raised up. He will displace the goddess and he will use her body to make the word. He will redefine time, he will create new gods, and he will propose a new order for mankind. And from now on, he's the highest priest who will unite with a female consort to ensure a year full of benefits. So you see this relation with the myths. Well, for me, it was interesting to see this. I mean, like scientific things are shown as somehow are shown in the myths, which for me is very interesting. So next. So under this patriarchal organization, the attributes of the goddess will be redefined. So in order to achieve this political and social transformation, the attributes of this ancient agrarian goddess will be denigrated because, for example, she's not able to protect her people from the threat of hungry tribes, but the warriors will do it. So she can't protect her people, so she's degraded. Or Marduk has now the ability to feed his people. So you don't need a goddess to ensure to be alimentados. You are managing the reproduction of plants and animals, so you have food. I took the case of Ishtar, which is very clear because under the patriarchal system, she will transform into the goddess of love and of war. But she's not protecting anymore the species. She will now protect the warriors. She will be worshipped by the Babylonians and Assyrians rulers to defeat the people they fight. And on the other side, her sexual attributes evoke sensuality, like everything is changed, but under the frame of a patriarchal system. So what happens in Europe? In Europe, the domestication of plants in Europe began only in 6,000 before. It moved from the Near East to Dardanelles and spread out through Europe then. But it was the end of the matriarchal societies in Europe occurs between 4,300 and 2,800. So the decline is the same in the East, in the Near East, than in Europe. The reasons, at least in Europe, the reasons is there is also this invasion of Aryan tribes, which come from the Mongolian steppe. They are hunters and gatherers, and they worship a patriarchal god, which is the sky, the lightning, the storm. And inside, you have this transformation of the settlement. So you have two elements, one who comes from inside and the other one who comes from outside. So let's go. So a synthesis, we can say, it's a process which can be observed in the transformations of the settlements. So around 5,000 BC, there is a break with a tendency of collective care and forms of equality. The city-states of Mesopotamia begin to look much more like the cities we have today. You have a nobility who holds power and wealth, a priest king at the top of society, huge walled monumental buildings looking like palaces, the degradation of the attributes of the goddess, the control of woman's sexuality, and the shift from a collective to an individual identity. And I think that in this period, the feminine attributes are blocked and passed over, but not entirely. That's, well, Karen has a whole chapter on all this stuff that they will reappear in one and another form through in the ancient history, because the religiosity of the people is concerned with the mother goddess. So they can't just take it away. People feel that the goddess is protecting them. So they can't say, no, don't believe that anymore. So they have to integrate her, at least, well, as we know her in the Christian religiosity, for example. So as conclusion, I would say I identify 4 moments in the study. The time of these matriarchal societies, which is practically the whole Neolithic, because in the whole Neolithic, you will see that life appears from women. But I focused on the upper Paleolithic, where the Venus appears, representing the sacred feminine. Then you have the Mesolithic, with the first settlements around Ein Gev, Mureybet, and where humans will conserve wild cereals. At this time, 2 symbols appear, the bull and the goddess, which are an intuition of 2 life-generating principles. Then we have the Neolithic with a powerful agricultural goddess mother. She knows the mystery of life, death, and resurrection, and the cycle of plants become related to the cycle of human beings' life. Just as the goddess is able to bring plants back to life, she's able to give new life to her consort and to mankind in general. And at least the fall of the goddess around 4000, where you will see a transformation of this once egalitarian agricultural societies into something very hierarchical, and they will now be presided by a masculine god or king. So the collective contents, such as taking care of the species, this will disappear and will open the path to a growing individualism. Behaviors of domination, subjugation, possession of goods and lands, subjugation of women grow more and more. And the main attributes and functions of the goddess are now framed within this patriarchal order. So these ruptures seems to occur in the moment of domestication of life, in which only the seed is considered as the generating force, as an intention, and as a project, the seed. And the container, or the pit, that allows the growing of the seed is denied and naturalized. It is denied as an intention or as a human project. But I think that this protective principle is also intentionality. And that's a big difference. And that's a difference which made the difference for myself something very interesting to consider when, because I will sort of, I know that a project is like a seed. A project is like, bah, I have this image, I have this project. But usually the project comes from a pit, from a co-presence of different things, of having understood a lot of things with other friends. It comes from a pit. It doesn't come alone. So it's like somehow it's like we recognize the seed as the project, but the pit where the seed has grown up is not considered. We don't see it inside ourselves. So I think both principles are essential for the development of life, and they are complementary. And as long as this enormous contradiction of giving importance to one and denying the other is not resolved, it's not possible to consider new steps in human development. And because of the energy needed to make the sleep is trapped in this contradiction. So this moment in which this feminine denied for so many thousands of years is being recognized today with its potentiality can be a very hopeful moment to bridge the gap that was broken 10,000 years ago. So this is why we showed at the beginning the rising up of Promethea, which we say it's maybe this place where we could sort of unite in a common intuition. Maybe this collapsing civilization can wake up those profound models which are sleeping inside ourselves. And as Silo said, only with a very strong need we will be able to wake them up. So I think we arrived at the end.
Anna, it was a
Anna,
wonderful,
you.
Wonderful
wonderful
presentation.
presentation.
Thank you, Anna.
Very
Yes.
nice, really is.